Are there just a few cartridges that have proven they're better than all the rest? You know, over the past century and a half, literally hundreds and maybe even thousands of cartridges have been designed, introduced, and used. And some die quickly. Others survive, but barely. And then a few thrive. And those are our go-to cartridges, right? Among those that thrive, now and then one stands out as superior. It has, I guess, a little something extra, right? And that extra turns that cartridge into a household name, one that lasts through the decades and spreads through the world. Welcome to the podcast today, folks. I'm Joseph Von Benedict, here with my son, William. He's been our Backcountry Apprentice, and his segment on basic fundamental techniques throughout the past 5 years has been one of our consistently most popular. So this can be fun. I do. You're authentic and genuine. So yeah, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
William hasn't done as much filming so far. Most of what we've done has all been just audio recording, but the one episode we did film was awesome. So good, I thought, we got to have it back. So, the Backcountry Hunting Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Let's define our topic of the day. Because before you address any topic, you should define it, right? What is it? And then we're going to do something a little bit special. We're going to step out of the discussion and read a letter from one of our listeners, a chap that's in New Zealand and has a really cool perspective. So first, let's define our primary topic of the day, the greatest cartridges of all time. These have to be proven around the world, right? They have to be known and used around the world. They have to be historically significant, and they have to be currently relevant, still in use, still popular, still favorites today. And finally, they have to be available in a wide selection of ammunition and rifles. And that's what we're going to use as our criteria to discuss these cartridges by. Now, to back up and go to this letter, this is one that William sent me this morning. We'd responded to it, and just a super cool perspective from a listener that he's unique, can't talk. He's unique in two ways. And I think you'll figure it out pretty quickly. I'm going to just read off my screen here. So, William.
Yeah.
Just listen and jump in whenever you feel there's something of note here.
Okay.
So, Edward in New Zealand writes, Hi, Joseph. I believe I have a reasonably significant volume of data/experience with ELD match bullets that you and your listeners may find interesting. Firstly, thanks for your relentless commitment to producing podcast episodes. You know, I kind of like that. Relentless commitment. I grew up milking a cow. And podcasts are like milk cows. If you neglect them, they don't like it. They don't do well. You know, cows get mastitis. Podcasts get the doldrums or something. I don't know. How obsessive am I about putting this podcast out each week?
I mean, you spend like a couple hours every week just aside from your writing and stuff and everything else just to make content and
just outlining.
Yeah.
I spent 3 hours this morning just outlining this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Generally, I figure about a day and a half per week goes to the podcast episode. How often do I skip?
Almost never. We've had some times when he had to, just take a break for a week or so. But yeah, for the past few years, he's been every week.
It's exhausting, but I love it.
Yeah.
And let's dive back into this message. So, Edward writes, I'm very new to hunting, and the information within your episodes has formed the basis of everything I know about hunting and calibers in general. When I say new to hunting, I mean very new. He writes, I'm 31. I had never shot a rifle until last year and have no family or friends interested in hunting to show me the ropes. In this regard, your podcast has been invaluable to learn about calibers, bullet performance, but also just hunting etiquette and conventions. Well, thank you. I appreciate you letting me know that it actually is accomplishing something out there in the world. I really appreciate that. So, here's where my ears pricked up and I started getting this little question mark floating above my head, right?
Yeah.
He said he believes he has statistically significant data for me. And then next sentence, he says, I'm brand new. I thought, how could that be, right?
Yeah.
He outlines how he gets started here. He says, I don't remember what episode it was, but it became apparent that the best cartridge for a first-time shooter in the typical New Zealand game I'd be hunting was a 6.5 PRC. So last year I bought a Bergara B2 Crest, chambered in 6.5 PRC. It's got a 20-inch barrel and a long over-barrel suppressor, as do most Kiwi rifles. When he means over-barrel, the suppressors literally screw over the top of the barrel. Part of the chamber stretches, the expansion chamber stretches backward over the barrel. So it makes for a shorter overall length while maintaining lots of expansion chamber. They're pretty cool. A little bit heavier, but very effective and nice and compact. He says, I use a Vortex Viper scope and a Spartan bipod. I tried the 143 grain ELDX and 143 grain Norma Bond Strike loads. The Norma ammo was laser accurate, producing half MOA groups most of the time and never more than 1 MOA. But muzzle velocity was only 2,500 feet per second.
That's pretty slow.
That's like 6.5 Creedmoor in a short barrel slow. Yeah, and kind of interesting. I would have questioned his use of a chronograph effectively, except he writes about some other loads that are doing more what you'd anticipate. Mm-hmm. He says the ELDX was faster at 2,700 feet per second, still slow out of a 6.5 PRC, even with a 20-inch barrel, but more in the realm of what it should do. But consistently produced large groups, mostly around 1.5 MOA. Both boxes have stated velocities around 2,950 feet per second. I used the Norma ammo for a bit because of the superior accuracy, but was always dissatisfied with the velocity. I understand why. You don't get a 6.5 PRC to shoot little slow loads, right?
Yeah.
Out of interest and desperation, I decided to try a box of 147 grain ELD match ammo. This is Hornady's standard, right? Kind of their gold standard. It had the same laser accuracy of the normal load, but with the 4 extra grains of weight and produced 2,760 feet per second average velocity in my rifle. There's way more energy. I had also read from a few sources that it makes a good hunting bullet for deer-sized game if you can pick your shot angles. So I tried it. Now I'm blessed to be living in the middle of the Southern Alps in New Zealand, surrounded by abundant public hunting land. And here is where the pieces of the puzzle begin to fit. Over the past 18 months, I have shot easily 100 plus feral goats, which are major pests, 40 plus deer, and a handful of tar and chamois with these 147 grain ELD match bullets. Holy moly. How many deer have you shot? I mean, you've been hunting coming up on 5 years.
Yeah.
How many big game animals total?
Big game animals. So I've got 4 deer so far. 1 cow elk.
5 deer.
5 deer. My bad. 1 elk, so that's 6. I've shot 1 bear.
Antelope, bear, 7, 8.
And then Africa, plains game.
4 animals. Plus a coyote or 2. So let's call it 12 to 14 animals, right?
Yeah.
And you're considered pretty fortunate. Like most 14 going on 15-year-old kids in the U.S. haven't shot nearly that much unless they live in a whitetail state where they can shoot does every weekend, right? This young man has shot, as he lists later, more than 150 animals in 18 months. That's a lot. He's pretty passionate. He also notes that he gets the meat to appreciative sources everywhere and that all of his meat that he eats is this wild game that he shoots himself. Good on him, right?
Yeah.
Man, he is racking up some experience with a specific bullet. So yes, he absolutely has statistically relevant data. This is pretty cool. This is the sort of testing you should do, folks, before you begin claiming anything about a bullet. And you need to do your forensic analysis after the fact. So he goes on, he says, so far I have a 100% kill rate from the ELDX bullet, the first shot, and have not once needed to fire a follow-up shot. This also tells me he's getting close enough. He's always within his ethical range, and he's making good, clean shots. That's awesome. I'd estimate, he continues, 95% of the animals were stone dead within 10 seconds and 10 yards of where they were standing. The remaining 5% wouldn't have run more than 50 yards. The shots have varied between 10 yards and 650 yards. The man can shoot.
Yeah.
Though typically around 200 to 400 yards. I have also taken a range of angles, focusing on double lung shot placements and trying to avoid the front shoulder bone on larger deer. That is crucial when you're using a thin jacketed match type bullet. This guy's doing exactly what he should be. Many animals, he says, were young meat animals, though there have been a few big-bodied red stags and fallow bucks in there, too. Now, how big is a big red stag? Probably about like a big cow elk.
Yeah, big
over
cow.
there, 350 to 400 pounds, I'm guessing.
Not a small animal, but not like huge.
Certainly not in that 700 to 1,000 pound range that will get a big Rocky Mountain elk, or up to 1,200 pounds for a Roosevelt elk.
Right.
But still, fairly tough
size.
Animal.
Yeah.
He says, I know there's generally a bit of hesitation to recommend or endorse using a match bullet on game. However, I have had nothing but consistent, reliable, and effective performance from this bullet. I feel that my experience on over 150 animals was worth sharing. Absolutely, and thank you. And I'll tell you what, a lot of people believe that the ELD match bullet is a better hunting bullet than the ELD X bullet, which wanted to be designed specifically for hunting. The ELD match has a thin jacket all the way around. The ELDX jacket tapers a little bit. It's a little bit thicker. I'm not one of the people that believes the ELD match is better. I think the ELDX was designed for a purpose, and it does its job pretty well. That said, I still will choose the ELD match to hunt with in certain conditions. Last January, I shot a real nice coos deer in Mexico using exactly the load that this gentleman's hunting with, and it performed perfectly. Within its realm and its comfort zone, it's outstanding. He says, so my question is, do you think this is just a lucky streak and I should go back to a hunting-specific bullet for more reliable performance long-term? Man, lucky streaks don't last 150-plus animals with one-shot kills. I don't know if I've ever talked to anybody else that has 150 consecutive one-shot kills. Holy smokes. I don't know what to say about that. No, don't switch unless you go much bigger. Maybe something like a sambar stag in Australia, or if you come to the U.S. and you hunt a big bull elk in thick timber, or something like that. But for what you're doing, I think you have just about the ultimate load. And he says, I primarily hunt for meat rather than trophies, and wild venison is the only source of meat in my diet. I also enjoy giving to friends, etc. So don't worry, the meat is not going to waste. And then he attaches a couple pictures of his biggest fallow buck and red stag so far. The stag is nice. It looks like it's 5x6. The fallow deer is outstanding. Yeah, it's a really good buck. So anyway, just wanted to share that message with you. I really enjoyed receiving it. I actually asked him if he's charted a percentage of the shots that exited on those game animals. Pretty interested in hearing that. But anyway, that's our letter for the day, and it's brought to you today by Simbita Custom Knives. I know Evan Simbita is a man that would appreciate 151 shot kills in a row, and his knives would make short order of all 150 of those. Okay, without further ado, let's dive right into our topic of the day. And keep in mind that these are just one man's idea of the greatest cartridges of all time, right? You might say the Gospel of Von Benedict, or the Gospel of Cartridges according to Von Benedict. If you disagree, or if you just want to add, please let me know by sending me a personal message on patreon.com/backcountry. You can also email them, backcountryhuntingpodcast@gmail.com, but I check those rarely. I'm just so busy now. I'm really prioritizing and focusing on the messages I get from our loyal patron members on patreon.com/backcountry. So in historical order now, here are what I consider to be the best of the best cartridges ever introduced. And I got to just step out of scene here for a minute, William. Were you surprised to see this lineup? And we've intentionally not discussed it. I think you can recognize most of these.
Yeah, I can recognize most of them. I do think there are a couple missing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk about that afterward.
Yeah, but
and I want to hear what those are.
Okay.
So I've arranged these in kind of in order of seniority, folks. So we're going to start in historical order with the 4570 Government. It was introduced in 1873. It was the official military cartridge of the time in rifles. They used it in the Tractor Springfield. This is the rifle that fought in the hands of General Armstrong Custer's army at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. There were other cartridges at the time that were probably more common, the 4440 Winchester and some others, 45 Colt. It didn't really get used in rifles at the time. We're talking hunting cartridges. Then shortly after that, the 3030 came along, and I'm sure there are those out there that sneezed and looked at me funny and said, how can you not say the 3030 is greater than the 4570? What would your response be to that? And do you agree?
So I don't know if you're sticking yourself to 5 right here, but I would think that the 3030 should be in there. It's been produced in millions upon millions of rifles, used internationally by hunters, and yeah, I don't know, but the 4570 kind of was able to lead the way to more cartridges, rimmed, straightish, kind of smaller tapered cartridges that made their way into the hands of hunters. And 4570 is where all that started, and it's still extremely popular today, especially in bear country. So
yeah, especially in bear country. Now, one of the reasons that forced me to choose the 4570, and I did kind of agonize over this, instead of the 3030 was, well, a couple things. It was a standard U.S. military cartridge.
Yeah.
It was before the 3030. It came first, right? It paved the way. It's more powerful, and it has taken, I believe, every species of game animal on the planet, including Cape buffalo and even elephant. There are some guys out there that have specifically used a lever action 4570 for those big animals. No 3030 that I'm aware of has done that, right? So those are some contributing factors. Another is that one of the chaps at Marlin recently told me that about 60+% of their sales in their lever actions is 4570, not the 3030, not the 357 Magnum, the 44 Magnum. That blew my socks off, but it told me something. Another is start looking at factory ammo. There is a plethora of really good 4570 factory ammo on the market, more than 3030.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So anyway, those are a few of the reasons that I chose it instead. Now, best actions suited for this cartridge, I'm going to say are lever actions number 1 and single shots number 2. And there are 2 or even 3 different levels of loading in this cartridge. You got the early low pressure stuff that's standardized in factory ammo because of
the trapdoor Springfields.
Exactly. And why?
Because those actions weren't strong enough to take the pressures that modern lever actions can now today with their black powder base designs. They're just not strong enough to hold the full house loads that the 4570's has potential to do. Yeah.
So there are loads now, factory loads now, that are marked for strong actions only, and they might specify like Marlin 1895 and Winchester 1886.
Yeah.
And those are the really good ones. The light loads work fine, but you might shoot a soft nose 400 grain bullet at about 12 or 1300 feet per second. The full house, as you say, lever action type loads, or they're safe in like Sharps single shot rifles, Winchester high wall rifles, and so forth. Those are quite a bit more powerful. You'll shoot a 300 grain bullet at 2,000 feet per second or thereabouts with some of them. What about a third level? Are you aware of a third level?
Third level, well, I know Buffalo Bore makes some pretty stout loads, right? With like 500, not 500, maybe 450 grain bullets.
Yeah, 400 to 500.
Yeah.
Yep. And we're going to talk about some great factory loads here in a minute. But have you heard of the Siamese Mauser?
Oh, yeah.
Super strong bolt action.
Uh-huh.
How about the Ruger number 1?
ring number one is a really strong single shot based off of the falling block action.
Yeah. So as far as I know, there aren't any factory loads created in this really high pressure level, but most cartridge cases made for the 4570 can handle it. And if you're loading for one of these ultra strong actions, you can load even heavier. And there are some loading manuals that have a third tier that's listed specifically for Ruger number ones, Siamese Mausers, and so forth. Pretty cool. Now, traditional bullet weights for the 4570 range from about 250 to 540 grains. And, obviously there are outliers, but that's where the most popular ones are. And really the best stuff is generally 300 to 450 grains with some specialized loads.
Mm-hmm.
So I listed a few of my personal favorite factory loads here. One is this one we're looking at right here in front of us. And that is a 300 grain Barnes triple shock bullet as loaded in both the Vortex and the Pioneer line of ammunition. It exits the muzzle of, I think it's a 20-inch barrel or 22-inch barrel, 1,925 feet per second. Tends to be super accurate, penetrates really well. I've seen it penetrate 32 to 36 inches in calibrated ballistic gelatin, 15% gelatin, so it's a little denser than that they use on human or to simulate human testing. Another favorite is the Hornady Lever Evolution ammo with 325 grain FTX bullets at about 2,000 feet per second. That's smoking, and it's a pretty aerodynamic bullet for a 4570. That's probably your best all-around bet for everything from white-tailed deer up to caribou and moose and so forth. Another favorite, although it's hard to find, is the Swift lever. I don't even know. I think they just call it lever action ammunition, loaded with 350 grain A-frames at 1,770 feet per second. That's a really tough, deep penetrating bullet as well. It's quite similar to the Barnes. Maybe penetrates even a little deeper because that Barnes opens up real big, has a huge mushroom. And then finally, there's a specialized load I really like. This is what I used to carry when I was packing in coastal brown bear country for guides. In my Marlin, I'd carry Garrett 540 grain hard cast hammerhead ammo. And it's rated, I think, 1,550 feet per second for the max load, or you can get a slightly milder load that's 1450-ish. And this is out of like guide gun length rifles.
Still though, 540 grains at 1,500 feet per second. That's fast.
And they have a great big me-plat on the front. That's that flat nose. Why is that important?
Well, it imparts more energy upon impact because of the frontal area and the bullet, right? Yeah.
That's right. And it has a couple of other characteristics. Since it's so wide and flat, it tends to cut through bone rather than deflect it. So if you just catch the edge of a heavy femur bone or something like that on a raking shot going away, let's say you're a guide trying to stop a bear that a client has wounded, you're more likely to get that deep straight line penetration. And that hard edge, which good cast bullets have on that big me-plat, severs arteries more effectively rather than letting it stretch around those like a rubber band, because arteries are super flexible. All right. Favorite bullet to hand load for this? I've got two. One is that 350 grain A-frame by Swift, because with a full house load and a 4570 or similar bullet, I run that a lot in my 4590. It's a very impressive controlled expansion, deep penetrating bullet. The other one, funny enough, is a 300 grain jacketed hollow point, a soft nose hollow point design that's really engineered for those old trapdoor spring-filled velocities.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
And this is kind of a funny side story, but I used to shoot that load a lot out of a Sharps 1874 with a 32-inch barrel.
I know this story.
It was smoking. I got a lot of velocity out of that bullet. We had a neighbor lady that had a garden overrun by jackrabbits. And so 2 or 3 evenings a week, I would go over there and wander the ravines behind her house. And let me tell you, out to 150 or 180 yards, even with iron sights, I could pretty well turn a jackrabbit inside out, nothing left but the skin with that load. I don't know why it was so much fun, but it just was. Really effective. It also just clobbers deer-sized game because you get a huge mushroom. And on a deer, you don't need that much penetration. I would not use that load on elk, but for deer and small stuff that you just kind of want to turn into fur puffs, pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Favorite rifles?
Ooh.
Yes. I don't have any lever action Marlins, do I?
I mean.
Okay, if you were to guess just off the cuff what my favorite 4570 rifle models are, what would they be?
Probably Marlin 1895
Yep.
SBL.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
I don't know if you've used a new Trapper version from Ruger, the guide version.
I have.
Oh, really?
Yep. I like them all, but you're right. The SBL is my favorite. It's stainless. It's got a nice rail on the backside with a good aperture sight and a post type front. I really like that configuration. 18-inch barrel, full-length magazine, lots of capacity, lots of maneuverability.
Yeah, super handy.
Okay. Another favorite is on the far end of the stick, and that's that Sharps 1874 that I mentioned. You got to have a good single shot in a 4570 among your favorites. And then the other, I'm trying to do 3, maybe 4 favorites in each of these categories, is the Winchester 1886 short rifle as being currently produced, or if you can find one, a carbine with that carbine buttstock. The butt plate's a little kinder. That, I think, the 1886 short rifle is the most aesthetic 4570 lever action ever built. My opinion, but it's just a beautiful, sleek design. John Browning design too.
Yeah. That
really brings it home. So that's kind of my trio of favorite 4570s.
That's a pretty good list right there.
Yeah. Now you don't have a 4570 yet.
Not yet. I need to correct
your father
that.
has been neglecting you. So if you were to pick one, what would you pick? From my list or others?
From your list.
Or others.
Or others. Well, I'd probably go with the new main Ruger Marlin. Probably in the guide version. It has a nice gray laminate stock and nice compact barrel, stainless, but handy, and they usually shoot pretty well. So
yeah, they do. The ones I've tested sure do.
Yeah, so that's probably what I'd pick. But I'm too in debt to you right now to start working off another
He's my
rifle.
indentured servant because his collection is bigger than there are days in the hours in the day to work to earn them off. It's all right, buddy. Well, I like it that way. Okay. You know what? I think maybe I'm going to tell another quick story. I want to tell a little personal experience story with each of these cartridges, and I'm not sure jackrabbits qualify for the 4570. A couple of years ago, I got to go along with Mike Painter, who was at the time the marketing agent for Barnes Bullets, and we went on a black bear hound-based hunt in Idaho, and it was awesome. He shot a nice boar, about a 200-pounder with a 44 Magnum. I shot a similar bear, a whisker smaller than his, with a 4570. And both of us were using Barnes all-copper bullets. His bear died ethically fast, but it kind of did that black bear thing where it pretended it wasn't getting shot. I think he shot it several times as it climbed down out of that tree and just about jumped in among the dogs. My bear, I shot once, and he was standing sideways on a giant branch way up in the tree, and he just instantly turned and lashed onto the tree. I hit him again through the back into the vitals, and he dropped limp and lifeless. I think the time between shots was like 1.1 seconds.
Yeah, it was really fast.
Pretty fast. I impressed myself afterward looking at the video. What was more impressive though was how fast that big heavy hitting bullet killed that bear. It was profoundly good. Okay, let's move to our next cartridge, which is vastly different. And is this one right here? Do you recognize that one at a glance?
That should be the 7x57 Mauser, which
is
an
indeed
awesome cartridge. Yeah.
Yeah. Both of us have hunted with it in Africa. And I'm going to get your story, your personal story at the end of this as an example. So the 7x57 Mauser, also known in sporting circles in England as the 275 Rigby, was introduced in 1892 and served in a ton of militaries around the world and conflicts.
A lot.
For decades and decades. It really is the cartridge that inspired our 30-06. As the story goes, Theodore Roosevelt and his Rough Riders took part in the Spanish-American War and came back thinking our 30-40 Craig sucks compared to what they're shooting at us, right?
Yeah.
And so he went to the War Department, I'm keeping this pretty casual here, and said, we need a better cartridge. They came out with the 30-03, designed to shoot 220 grain round nose bullets, more or less designed for the 30-40 Craig. I think some bean counter was saying, we have millions of these bullets, just load them. And Roosevelt was like, nope. They tried it. It kind of fell flat. It did not give the added level of performance they wanted. So they eventually went to lighter, faster bullets, and that's what took us through World War I and World War II.
150 grain Spitzers,
Yep. At a pretty zippy 2,700 plus feet per second. Fast for the time. So the 7x57 Mauser shot long, heavy for caliber bullets at modest recoil. There was, I believe, 173 grain round nose, what they called full patch, full metal jacket bullet. And there were lighter bullets that went a little faster. Because it had those long, heavy for caliber bullets, it offered, with those full metal jacket bullets, extreme penetration. That's why Karamojo Bell liked it so much for shooting elephants in the brain. He didn't need huge authority on impact because of the precision, right? And he found that bullet would reliably reach the brain of elephants from most of the angles he needed to shoot at. That cartridge, because of that bullet, as well as some good controlled expansion soft nose bullets, has successfully taken every species on Earth. This is kind of a repeating characteristic of all of these cartridges.
Yeah.
It's a favorite in Europe and Africa. Always has been. To this day, it still remains popular. It's a little less popular in the United States, but it does have a cult-like following. It's best used in bolt action and single shot rifles, in my opinion. The bolt action is just because it's a quintessential hunting rifle, a nice magazine Mauser. It's just awesome in a 7x57. A great single shot rifle like a Ruger No. 1 or something really nice like a Park West Arms or Dakota Model 10. Perfect. Uses bullets from 120 to 175 grains in weight really comfortably. One unique characteristic of this cartridge is that it is typically loaded to fairly modest pressures, chamber pressures. That's because
military actions,
the early ones,
like 90s Mauser actions weren't as strong as the later 98 kinds, just not as strong. And so they got to keep those loads down because there's tons of sporterized 7x57 Mausers still floating out there.
Yeah. And candidly, most of them are plenty strong, but it isn't the most of them we're worried about. It's the one that we don't want blowing some well-intentioned man's head off. So what do you do to get the most out of that cartridge?
Hand load it.
Hand load it. Now, Europe tends to load it hotter than America does. They're not quite as litigation twitchy as we are over here. But even in that case, you're going to significantly exceed European loadings if you hand load the cartridge. That said, one of my all-time favorite factory loads for that cartridge is made by Federal's Custom Shop, and it pushes a 140 grain trophy bonded tip bullet at 2,900 feet per second. That's darned impressive. Another standard load is a lot more pedestrian. That's Federal's typical blue box 175 grain jacketed soft point at 2,390 feet per second. I like that one because it mirrors what, the African Plains game farmers and hunters would have been using for a century or more. And it works really, really well. That's not enough velocity to stress a bullet violently. So you're not going to pancake or grenade on impact to get good penetration and just simple, non-dramatic, clean kills. Another one that I really admire but have not had the chance to use much is Norma's 156 grain Oryx bullet. That's a bonded soft nose bullet. Exits at 2,640 feet per second, advertised. Why 156 grains? You know, as far as I know, that's a conversion from grams.
Probably.
I think it was gram 11 or 11.5 grams. Do you know why that weight was specified?
I don't actually.
It's pretty cool. That was the minimum weight in certain countries in Scandinavia and Northwestern Europe there. Yeah, Northwestern. I had to think about my globe for a minute. That was the minimum legal for European moose.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So when they started converting the gram measurements to U.S. or imperial, I should say, measurements, grains, it came out at 156 grains. That's why a lot of 6.5 by 56 5 bullets are 156 grains.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And my favorite bullets to hand load in that cartridge are Nosler's 160 grain AccuBond. Super well balanced, pretty aerodynamic, fantastic performance. And the same weight, 160 grain Swift A-frames. Super penetration with that. I saw that load out penetrate 458 Winchester Magnum, 4570.
Really?
375 H&H, a bunch of other bullets. Now, we were shooting with Ron Spomer at big stumps, maple stumps. And so you never know when it may have just hit a softer path rather than big knots or whatever. But still, that 160 grain Swift A-frame went through a massive maple stump and exited. It was the only bullet we tested that day that did that.
Dang.
Yeah.
That's
kind of impressive.
Impressive, yeah.
So, favorite rifles. There aren't as many 7x57s on the market as I would like. You can find vintage military stuff, both sporterized and still in a military configuration. Yeah. What do you think about people sporterizing good military rifles now?
Now?
Yes.
It's a sin beyond
reproach. Yes, it's the 8th deadly sin.
Yeah. I mean, it's understandable why people did it, like, up to even 70 years ago.
Yeah.
Or 50 even. But no, today where military rifles, old vintage ones in original condition, are just worth so much more. Like, you could sell probably most any original military Mauser and get enough money for a decent modern hunting rifle and a probably better suited cartridge if you wanted. And instead of just chopping it down and not destroying history.
Yeah. Yeah. And by doing that, you're not destroying what is becoming an artifact.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if it's already sporterized, by all means, folks. But if it's original military configuration, keep it that way. Honor the past. All right. So that said, modern guns on the market are less common. And I'm going to just tell you my favorite right now is a Park West Arms model SD76 rifle. It's an Alpine model with some customizations. Beautiful piece of walnut. It's got a skeletonized, color case hardened steel recoil pad. And this is the rifle that we took to Africa 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, when you and Audrey and I went.
Yeah.
Year and a half? Yeah. Fall of 23.
Yeah.
Whatever that was.
A while ago.
And it worked fantastic. That's my favorite. They are expensive, but folks, if you're a gun snob, a real lover of fine firearms, you're lucky. I'll tell you why. Let's say you're a car guy, blue collar mechanic or bus driver or school teacher or gun rider, whatever you do, and you love Lamborghinis. You're going to save a long time before you can afford one. You probably never will. You might get to go drive one once or twice in your life. The finest firearm, well, short of a $70,000 Holland & Holland double rifle,
right,
is achievable by all of us. If you squirrel away your beer money every month, in a few years, you'll be able to buy something like a $7,000 Park West firearm. And that is a beautiful thing. Okay. Another really big favorite of mine, and one that's more readily affordable, still not cheap, but is the Ruger number 1, as currently offered right now by Lipsy's distributor. I think it's the light sporter configuration, so it's got a 24-inch barrel, express type iron sights, classic for Africa, right? And blued furniture and a high-grade wood. It's an upgraded level of walnut, and they're just fantastic. I've actually got one that I'm going to be testing, writing about soon, and we'll do a YouTube video on it so you can see it. Really nice. One of my biggest regrets in not purchasing a rifle that I really admired is going to typify the next one.
Yeah.
And that's a used but no longer produced bolt action. Now you can find Model 70 Winchesters and so forth, but this specific one was a Remington Model 700 Classic. It was built kind of like Remington's mountain rifle. I found one in a pawn shop in northern Utah, like brand spanking new, with a $750 price tag on it.
Oh, I remember that.
About a half decade ago. And
that's right, when we moved up here.
We were starting to build our home. We knew we were going to be over budget and underpaid, right? And I just couldn't bring myself to pay that $750. I've regretted it every day since.
Yeah.
Those rifles now go for closer to $2,000 on Gunbroker, but they are really, really good rifles. Great example of what that cartridge should be chambered in. Right. It's not a controlled feed mauser type action, but they're real nice and they tend to shoot real well.
Yeah.
So you had not the first kill, but it was a second or third kill with that Park West Arms rifle in 7x57, using that Federal
140 grain
custom shop load. Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, we were in Africa, obviously, and I was really hoping to get a non-trophy cutible bull. So these are either bulls that are like too old really to breed and be helpful to the population, or have, you know, broken horns so that they can't be like sold as
and if it's a super
animals.
old bull, it's one with inferior genetics, because sometimes you'll find an old bull with giant horns.
Yeah. So we're just cruising along and
we thought we're done for the night.
Yeah,
we were leaving the hunting area.
We're just driving back to camp, and they say take what the bush offers and stuff, and we actually spotted a cutible bull off the road 250 yards. And
when he says road, this is a 2-track through the Kalahari.
Yeah,
the foothills adjacent to the Kalahari
basically
Desert.
A track. Yeah. And we all threw up our binos and looked at it real quick, and we could tell that he had a busted horn on one side. And so I was like super pumped up, and we got off and we made a stalk just a little bit closer. So I was at about 220 yards ish, right?
I thought you were closer for this one.
Closer, maybe.
At any rate,
I thought
it wasn't a far
200
shot.
to 220. Yeah.
Put up the sticks.
Yeah, put up the sticks, and he was looking at us, but quartering slightly too. So I aimed just into the shoulder a little bit and shot, and he just ran off. And we went up there a second later, and he had just gone about 50 or 60 yards.
I don't think he'd even gone that far. We went around to find him because he just ducked into a thicket, brush, as they do. And he was laying right there. Perfect shot. Shot on the X. Yeah.
Yeah, but that was a super nice rifle, shot really well. And I mean, I like recoil. I like big guns, but that one was a pleasure to shoot. It fun.
And we actually found that bullet mid ribs under the hide on the far side. So you'd hit him just right where that big shoulder knuckle is. You tucked it just inside of that.
Yeah.
And it crossed right through his vitals and killed him dead as a stone.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And I mean, I've used that exact same bullet projectile, you know, with my 7mm08, which is kind of the 7x57's ballistic twin. Kind of
modern version.
I've used it on deer, bear. Yeah. Always.
Folks, we're going to leave you hanging right here because we went so long, we got to make 2 videos out of this. Thank you for tuning in. Check out our upcoming video, which we'll publish shortly, a few days to a week or so from now, on the rest of what we believe are the greatest cartridges of all time. I'm Joseph Von Benedict. We'll see you down the road.